Hello my friends and welcome back. You're going to have a fantastic week. Yesterday I was supposed to make a video but I could not because I was flying from Canada back to United States and right now I'm actually in Minneapolis. So if you are in Minneapolis, hi. What happened during the weekend is one of the craziest and strangest interviews came out. I mean, Tucker Carlson interviewing Vladimir Putin. And of course, if you have not heard Vladimir Putin speak before, then this was really big news for some people. They didn't really know what Putin says, what he thinks, but I have heard him speak many times about what he thinks. I've heard him spoken his mind, so it was nothing new about it for me. But I will take now this interview into bits and analyze it. And of course, I'll let you make up your own mind. And I'm encouraging you to put your thoughts in the comments. I will read them. So, of course, Putin spoke how he sees things. And I honestly, personally see things a lot differently than Putin. So I will now open up a post, which is truth versus lie about that interview. And this is my objective truth right here. If you agree with me or disagree with me, I'll be reading your thoughts in the comments below. Lie number one, which these lies are all what Putin said, what he monologued about, because the whole interview is quite boring to watch because he's not a very good speaker. He speaks quite tediously. It's boring, honestly. So I'll just speed through it for you so you don't have to waste your time on doing this. Putin claimed that the purpose of the special military operation in Ukraine is the ban of all neo-Nazi movements in Ukraine. Well, the truth about it is that neo-Nazism in Ukraine is a problem invented by the Russian propaganda. Meanwhile, not Ukraine but modern Russia turned into a Nazi state, with unlimited dictatorship, repression against dissenters, expansion into neighboring countries, and declaring these countries fictitious and fake. Yes, and I'm here to comment that Ukraine does have a nationalistic movement which also has a minority percentage of far-right nationalistic movements which might have Nazi sympathies, but the way Russian propaganda is painting it for useful idiots in the West is that Ukraine is in need of liberation from the Nazism, which is not the case, but in Russia it is actually the case, because in Russia the government actually encourages people and youth groups to become more far-right and more Nazi. While in Ukraine the government is fighting against it if it happens, like in the Western countries also. There are in every country far-right minorities as there are in Ukraine, and Ukrainian government is heavily criticizing them and fighting against them and not giving them any platform. While in Russia they are encouraged by Putin himself. Lie number two by Putin: the war could have ended a year and a half ago, but Ukraine succumbed to Johnson's demands, Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister at the time. Well, the truth about this fact is the Russian-Ukrainian negotiations in Belarus and Turkey in February to March 2022 did not reach an acceptable result for the parties. Moscow tried to persuade Kiev to surrender. However, the defense forces, having stopped the invaders near Kiev, relieved Ukrainian diplomats from the need to succumb to Russian diktat. Yes, the whole point for the negotiation was that Putin thought that Ukraine will lose any day now and they're ready to give away their land and their government, but the Ukrainian armed forces actually managed to stop the huge Russian convoy to Kiev. They managed to stop the Russians in the south, in the west, in the east. And there was no pressure on Ukrainian diplomats anymore to give in to these outrageous Russian demands. So the talks broke down because Ukraine wanted to stay independent. That's how simple it is. Russia wanted to take it from them and they just said, no, we will fight. Lie number three from the Tucker Carlson Putin interview is: Ukraine was created by Lenin and then again by Stalin. This is how Putin thinks. This is the bubble he lives in, while the truth is much more complicated, like it was in Estonia. Also, the Ukrainian state was founded not by Lenin and Stalin, but by the Ukrainian national movement, simultaneously with Poland, Lithuania, Georgia, and even Russia itself as a republic. And even Russia, there was a national movement, the White Army, the Tsarist army, and there was the Tsar army, then there was the Reds, of course the communists, and there were also the Republicans who wanted the Russian Republic a democratic nation. I mean, there were many different movements. Only in Russia the far left communism, the most aggressive part, won. The Russian Bolsheviks did not create but conquered independent Ukraine, turning it into another Soviet republic. And this is what they did with every neighboring state. Lie number 4 from the interview was that there is a civil war going on between Russians in Ukraine. Now, this sentence in itself, civil war is war between two parties of the same country. Ukraine and Russia are two different cultures, two different parties, two different armies, two different nations. Everything is too different there. Truth, Ukraine is a mature political nation that unites citizens of different ethnic origin and religion. Ukraine has a great historical and cultural heritage, its own language and army. Ukraine voted for independence on August 24th, 1991. And by the way, it's very much connected because Estonia voted for independence in 1991, 20th of August, so 4 days before. And my grandfather back at the time in the parliament was one of the people to vote for the independence of Estonia. Back at the time, we had half a century of Soviet occupation and people had been shot for these actions. So nobody knew what was going to be done with them. So my grandfather had his bags packed after the voting and was waiting for the Russian commissars to take him away. But no, we got free. Didn't go that way anymore. Soviet Union was done. And the same way, Ukraine voted for independence and they became a new democratic nation in the Eastern Europe. Any invasion of other countries on Ukrainian land, encroachment on statehood and sovereignty, sorry for my English, is not a civil war. It's a war of conquest that Russia is doing right now. The Russian-Ukrainian war is an aggressive war of Russia against Ukraine. Russia is destroying Ukrainian cities and killing people with missiles, kidnaps children, tortures prisoners, occupies territories. The list is endless. And from this post, the final lie, there were many more of course, but these are one of the more important ones I want to highlight. And I will be analyzing this interview for a long period of this video, just to let you know. Lie number 5, the United States just needs to negotiate with Russia and the war will end. The truth about this is Russia and Putin regularly violate all agreements and refuse to comply with international agreements signed by the Russian leadership. By carrying out a full-scale attack on Ukraine, the Russians violated about 400 international agreements. Negotiating with Russia at the expense of Ukraine means untying Putin's hands for an even bigger and more terrible war in Europe and other countries. Negotiating with Russia right now is to follow exactly in Chamberlain's footsteps before World War II. It would be Chamberlainian deal if it would make any deal with Russia. There is no negotiations with terrorists, and Russia has been declared by at least half of the Western countries as a terrorist state. You do not negotiate with terrorist states because they will just use it against you. They will use any kind of pause, Russians I mean, for gathering strength and attacking you later. And the truth is Putin needs this pause right now because they're advancing very slowly with very high losses. So he would accept any kind of negotiations that would put a pause on these hostilities right now for him to gather more forces, learn from the mistakes and actually then successfully conquer Ukraine fully. So no pause necessary, no ceasefire, no peace necessary. What is necessary is Ukrainian victory. Now, my friends, since this interview had made a lot of waves in the Russian and in the Western media, I will not stop. I will give you 12 more points, most important points. So after watching this video, first of all, you know the most important points and sentences coming out of this video, what Putin thought, and you know what is lie, what is truth. I let this to be decided by you, but you know what it was about and what Putin explained in one of his monologues. So now I bring to you Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who at one point was one of Russia's very richest men. He was in top 5, he was a billionaire. He was jailed and imprisoned by Putin, and his assets, which at the time was a large portion of Russian fossil fuel industry was in his hands, was stolen by Putin. This is how simple it is, just nationalized. And he spent 10 years of his life in prison. Now, he has analyzed this interview also and brings us 12 points that are the most important, that are lacking factuality in this interview. I'll read them to you. Number one, he claimed Russia had become Europe's largest economy, while the truth is Russia ranks 32nd in Europe for the GDP per capita. So Putin is living in a small illusion or delusional bubble where facts, numbers, everything is just taken out of thin air or taken out of the yes men surrounding him. So this is what he claims. And some people, useful idiots like Tucker Carlson himself in the West, are giving him platform. And other useful idiots who follow Tucker Carlson, for example, watch this interview. They have never heard Putin speak. And suddenly it's like, oh, it opened my eyes. And they don't do their own research. Well, a very mediocre Putin fact and monologue is that Russia is the first economy in Europe. So if you want to start there, start there. It's a faulty foundation. So let's take the second one. Putin once again trotted out the old lie about United States promises NATO will not expand east. The truth is, there was never such an agreement. Even Gorbachev said so. And in any case, countries join NATO of their own free will. If Putin didn't want NATO to grow, he shouldn't declare war on his neighbors. Yes, NATO is a defensive alliance against aggression, against foreign aggression. Estonia joined NATO, my country, with our own free will. The people wanted this. The majority of Estonian people wanted this. Now, Russia attacked Ukraine. And what happened? Finland immediately joined NATO. Finland, who had been, well, neutral, not really neutral, they have really suffered under Russian aggression, but they have been neutral after the Winter War, playing on both sides, but immediately they were pushed into NATO by Putin's aggressive foreign policy and the war he's waging on Ukraine. Sweden, who never wanted to join NATO, people of Sweden, not Swedish government, but the people of Sweden did not think NATO was necessary for them, immediately were pushed to join NATO. So Putin's biggest fear became a reality by him acting against it, by him attacking Ukraine. He pushed Sweden and Finland into NATO, lengthening the NATO's northern border with Russia 1,000 kilometers and bringing the biggest artillery force in Europe, which is Finland, right next to Russian northern bases, right next to Russian submarine fleet in Murmansk. So this is Putin's actions, not CIA, not United States, like Putin says. It's his own aggressive war waging on its neighbors that pushed Finland into NATO. So this lie, in my eyes, has been debunked. Number 3, Putin denied ever having said the United States was preparing to attack Russia. In fact, he did say that 3 days before invading Ukraine, which he said would be the advanced foothold for the so-called NATO assault. So he calls NATO a United States puppet, and he says NATO is aggressive. And then people, useful idiots in the West, actually take his words and put them onto maps. Oh, look, NATO is expanding east. Yes, truthfully so. We can see NATO expanding closer to Russia in the last half a century from Europe. From the beginning of NATO to now, it has expanded eastwards. But you know how NATO expansion happens? By a referendum of the country who wants to join NATO. That means by a fact that the electatives of these people or the people of the country itself vote if they want to step into NATO or if they don't. So no country can be put into NATO against their will. It's the will of the people of that certain country. So NATO expansion means that wherever it is expanding to, the people really want it. Because they're democratic nations and they vote on such stuff, not like in Russia. Number 4, he said that the Maidan protest 2014 turned violent even though Yanukovych refused to use any force against them. When I was in Kiev, I visited Yanukovych's castle or palace, and I've never seen extravagant in such levels. The Louis XIV, the Sun King of France, was nothing compared to Yanukovych. The truth is, Yanukovych percut riot police brutally dispersed protesters, and its snipers shot dead 76 people in 3 days in February 2014. Yes, there is a memorial in the square of Maidan for the casualties of these snipers, and this was Yanukovych's orders to shoot live ammunition into the crowd en masse, killing 76 people. Lie number 5. Putin said that Kiev started the conflict in Donbass by using its air force against civilians. Now, the truth about this is that the conflict began on 12th of April 2014 when FSB officer Igor Strelkov Girkin, who right now is in prison in Russia, at the time he acted on Putin's orders, but then he was disillusioned by the fact that fish rots from the head and it's all Putin's fault, actually. Igor Girkin led separatists to seize the town of Slovyansk. Ukraine first used its aviation in response on May 26th in the battle for Donetsk airport. And I remember, I was a lot younger back then, but I remember these events and it was fully seen like a Russian aggression. It was one-on-one Russian aggression at the time. I mean, I followed the news every day back then by being, I was a young teenager following this. It was quite black and white, full Russian aggression. The next lie about this interview from Putin is, during Putin's rambling exercise in the alternative history at the beginning of the interview, Putin said Ukraine was an artificial entity created at the initiative of Joseph Stalin. The truth is that Ukraine was added to the Soviet Union in 1922 under Lenin, but the Ukrainian People's Republic was declared in 1917, and actually the Republic of Estonia, the independent country and state of Estonia, was declared in 1918, so very similar, because both of nations and all of the nations next to Russia, Eastern European, when the Tsarist occupying force, the Tsar Empire, collapsed because of the civil war against whites and the Reds in Russia, all of these nations, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland and Ukraine, emerged in between 1916 and 1920, all of our nations. And these were not like CIA puppets or whatever Putin wants to call these nations. These were the very sovereign people of these countries, the national people of Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, declaring and making their own country, national country based on their own language for the very first time in a millennia. Before the Bolshevik takeover and recognized by Russia's provisional government. Yes, recognized by Russia's provisional government. Also, we Estonians, 1980 to 1920 was Estonian independence war against the Soviets, against Lenin's government. They invaded. You know what? We won. Estonians won that war. And we were Tartu Peace, it's called. Tartu is the second biggest city in Estonia. This is signed, the peace is signed by Lenin's government. So the Lenin's government, the Bolsheviks, officially recognized Estonia as an independent state. So 1939, when Stalin occupied Estonia again, is a breach of that peace. But of course they did. Let's go to the next lie. And I know this video is going to be long, but everybody's talking about this interview, so I'll bring you my Estonian, Eastern European, Estonian viewpoint of it, if you're interested to listen. Putin said that Poland had forced Hitler to declare war in 1939 by being uncooperative with his plans. So this is what Putin thinks right now. Look at this sentence again. He said it in an interview. Whoever you are, if you're a Trump supporter, Biden supporter, Tucker Carlson supporter, whoever you are, let's take this sentence again. Putin believes that Poland forced Hitler to declare war on Poland in 1939. I don't know how any Trump supporter or Biden, how any person at all can justify this as anything else than delusions. Just delusions. Poland lost 25% of their entire population, as well as the biggest Holocaust crimes happened in Poland. So for this sentence to happen is first of all anti-Semitic. It is justifying Hitler's actions. It's a lot of things that in my eyes is pure delusional craziness. The truth is, Hitler's plans included the extermination of Poland's Slavs and Jews and its repopulation with Germans. Much like Putin is doing with Russia now, sending the minority groups in Russia to Ukraine to die, then to repopulate these minority areas in Russia with Russian-speaking minorities. Because the majority of Russia is not filled with Russians, but other Finno-Ugric and Asian nations. The so-called Polish provocation used as pretext for the invasion was a German false flag. Moving on to the next slide, my friends. If you're getting tired, get some coffee. I have some, because this is quite, it's a long interview and it's tedious and it's quite boring. So this is saving you a lot of time actually. Or if you want to put some hours of your life to watch this, of course, go and do it. Make up your own mind. Speaking of Zelensky, Putin said he had once asked the Ukrainian president why he, as the son of a World War II veteran, would collaborate with the neo-Nazis. The truth is, Zelensky's father was born in 1947 after the World War II ended. Now moving on to the next lie, Putin said that NATO has options to recognize Russian annexation of parts of Ukraine. Now the truth about this is it does not. NATO is not a dictatorial union like the Soviet Union was. NATO is a defensive alliance of democratic nations, so it does not have any such power. The United Nations has declared the annexations illegal under the international law, which every last NATO country respects and believes in and is the foundation of. And even if NATO wanted to, NATO has no more right to contest that ruling than Russia does. NATO has no right to decide any specific NATO country's leadership. The democratic people, the people of that specific country will elect the leadership, because one of the parts of belonging into NATO is similar values. Now the next interesting sentence that Putin believes is, Putin claimed that Ukrainians still consider themselves Russians. Now, me being to Kiev 6 times, every time I've spoken to people living in Kiev, living outside of Kiev, speaking to people Russian descent, living in Kiev and in Ukraine, people who speak actively Russian, they don't even speak Ukrainian. They still hate the Russians because their parents just died in eastern Ukraine, or their dog is dead, or their children perished of the Russian missiles, which land in Kiev almost daily. So even if Putin had a fifth column or a supportive group of Russian minority in Ukraine who wanted Putin's intervention, after the missiles started flying, he lost those people. Russian-minded people before the war are now Ukrainian-minded people. It is a bizarre thing that happened, because if you bombard civilians, they tend to not like you. Putin didn't think about that, I guess. The truth about this sentence is that Putin fundamentally misunderstood Ukrainian national identity and falsely believed Ukrainians saw themselves as Russians, key mistake that led to the disastrous invasion. A 2022 poll revealed 93% favored independence. Just 3% supported merging with Russia. And those 3%, what I'm talking about, the Russian minority, were now pushed also the pro-Ukraine, because they also are finding themselves under Russian bombardment and they know it comes from Russia. I mean, living in Ukraine, you don't have much of a choice to believe Putin's propaganda, because you see the missiles with Russian flags. I mean, it's very hard to believe the country's propaganda who is actually bombarding you with missiles. Now, my friends, to illustrate how much waves this interview created, and it's of course mostly for Russian internal consumption, people of Russia will eat up this interview, but X has shown 192 million expressions. Expression is not a view, not a click, it's showing of the interview, and if somebody clicks, then it turns into click. YouTube has shown 13 million and Facebook 0.1 million. So we can see that Twitter or X is very much pro sharing this interview. I'll let you to make up your own mind on these facts. My friends, now I'll bring to you a little bit of humorous story from a Russian kindergarten, which is true story, it really happened. I'll read you the report. The publication People of Baikal wrote about an incident in Irkutsk where a parent was fined 35,000 rubles for expressing an opinion in a kindergarten that there were too many military toys. So the parent was thinking that her child actually, supposed to be a child for a longer period of time and not have these weapons in the child's hands and not grow up so fast. Let them be children for a little bit. Don't give a Kalashnikov. Immediately, she was fined by the government for discrediting the Russian army. This is a new paragraph that will be used against almost everybody who even dares to think against anything anti-war in Russia. So yeah, real story, just happened actually 2 days ago. My friends, the video is finally ready. Mission accomplished. I'm here to confirm that the December fundraiser I did, the Baba Yaga Needle fundraiser, 182,000 that you guys donated. Well, here you can see it went to the right place and we delivered what you wanted us to deliver. Check out the video. my friends, Christmas is over and you guys wanted presents for Ukrainian units and you wanted presents also for Russian units, and we are here to deliver. As you can see, the fundraiser was extremely successful and you can see the outcome of it behind me and in front of me. The guys you see around me, they are responsible for a big portion of these videos you see online where drones are demilitarizing Russian occupiers. And we are here and you guys actually made it possible for them to do their job even more effectively. This here, my friends, is Alex Kinnish.
Good to see you, Artur. The campaign was so successful, Artur. We sold over 800 of the Vatnik Slayer patches alone, so that raised 80,000. I think in total for the entire campaign it was $180,000. It was the best ever 69 Sniffing Brigade campaign to date. This convoy is the largest one that we've done in a handover ever. Over $500,000 worth of equipment going to the Ukrainian armed forces over this weekend.
And you guys made it possible directly. If you know you got one of these patches, then you are very directly responsible for the cars, for the drones, for everything that is happening here today. Let me go into a little bit what do you see here. This here is Needle. Yes, from Game of Thrones, Arya Stark's sword, the Needle, because it stings like a needle. The purpose of this drone is to hunt down Russian electronic warfare units, machinery, equipment. It goes into and it explodes in a magnificent way, and then other drones can follow suit because the air is clear, no more jamming. HIMARS, Storm Shadow and precision weapons like that will follow and clean up the job. This drone, my friends, is called Baba Yaga. I would love to say it's from John Wick, the boogeyman, but actually it's an old Slavic fairy tale. It's the Vatnik Slayer. It is the last thing the occupier orcs will see and hear before they are knocked out cold and demilitarized. These drones will liberate Ukraine one tank at a time, one occupier knocked out cold at the time. You guys made this possible, so thank you for it. Alright, my friends, let's look at the battle map. This is Avdiivka, the place the Russians are pushing the most, and it's a very dangerous situation for Ukrainians. As you can see, the situation has changed over the weekend very heavily because Russians are pushing from the north, from the coal plant area. They actually have occupied a big chunk of urbanized area of Avdiivka, which is a huge problem because the main and the only logistical road supplying the entire Ukrainian garrison in Avdiivka, the only paved road, which is not under huge mud at this time, is this one right here, the road of life, the artery of Avdiivka. It is only a few hundred meters from the Russian troops. They have firing sectors on this road, so this road is pretty much unusable for Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian logistics. And all of these troops, thousands of Ukrainian troops, they need to eat, they need ammunition, they need medical evacuations, new drones. It cannot happen through this one road here anymore. It needs to take these field roads, which are also under Russian mortar fire and very muddy, so you cannot drive fast on these roads. So the situation in Avdiivka for Ukrainians, the fact is, has deteriorated in the past week very heavily, to the point that in the next 2 weeks Ukrainians might have to do a fighting retreat from this city. And it will be a political victory for Russia. Not a military one, because this city, while it has military importance only for the fact that both armies have concentrated their units into defense or attacking of this settlement, the land itself has much smaller military value than the percentage of armies concentrated into the area. So it's not a military victory, but it's a big political victory for Russia, because Putin needs to show something before the elections, which are coming. So he will sacrifice anything and anybody to get this settlement of Avdiivka. And unfortunately, the facts are on the ground here that Ukraine, in order to save manpower, the smartest thing now would be to do a fighting retreat from the settlement. We will see how the new Chief of Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Syrskyi, will react to this, how he will behave, because he is much more aggressive, he's much more action-minded than Zaluzhny was. Not that Zaluzhny was a bad commander, he was excellent, he was perfect and balanced, but he was changed for that, because now Zelensky thinks that Ukraine needs more aggressive actions, and this is why Syrskyi is here. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that Sersky's actions will result in more Ukrainian casualties than under Zaluzhny, but I do trust Zelensky as a political leader of Ukraine, so I'm not here to tell Ukrainians what to do, I'm only here to comment. My friends, now I'll bring you an interesting fact about Ukrainian mortar production. Not howitzer. They have their own howitzers, Bogdan, very good howitzers, but mortars. Smaller mortars which are really effective against small infantry units attacking. Usually, Russian attack style is small 15 to 20 infantry units. So mortars do a good job against them. How is Ukraine producing mortars? Vladislav Belbas, head of Ukrainian armored vehicles, opened up on the topic of an article published on Defense Express. According to him, they managed to produce around 1,200 mortars of different calibers, 60mm, 82 and 100mm last year, 2023. So 1,200 mortars, weapons in 2023. Good numbers. And 24,000 units of ammunition for mortars. This number could be a lot bigger. If we would talk about millions, then we would be in a very good place. 240,000, unfortunately, is lacking, huge deficit. Compared to the pre-full-scale war period, mortar production volume has increased more than 5 times. So just to illustrate to you that Ukraine is really much picking up the slack in their own weapons production, not relying on United States and European support, but producing mortars, producing howitzers of Bogdan, producing their own Stugna anti-tank guided missile system, producing their own BTR-4s, their own drones. Ukraine is doing as much as they can, but the logistics of such mass-scale weapons production is incredibly difficult. Ukraine has decentralized the productions, not to produce everything in one factory because it will be missiled as soon as the Russians know the coordinates. So they're doing everything they can. And I'm glad to see this, and this is why I bring you these facts. Now, Putin has done 2 political orders before his elections: take Avdiivka and push back the Krinky bridgehead from Kherson. Now, we talked about Avdiivka, but also I go to the Kherson front now, which is over the Dnipro River right here. As you can see, Russians have a concentrated force of over 10,000 men to push back this bridgehead, which Ukraine is holding with only 3 to 500 personnel, which is an incredibly successful action on the Ukrainian part. They don't need to push, they need to defend. But with that, they tie up over 10,000 Russian personnel into trying to push it back, because it's a huge political loss if Ukrainians even exist on the Russian-occupied side of the Kherson River. Dnipro River, sorry. So yeah, the Krinky bridgehead right here, little square kilometer area liberated by Ukrainians, defensive positions established. So what Russians did yesterday, they initiated again a huge attack, used tanks, Ka-52 attack helicopters and Su-25 planes. So they used air power, infantry and armored vehicles, everything they have actually, glide bombs. And they were not able to push the bridgehead out. Ukrainian defensive positions held, and Russians took heavy casualties. So this political order to charge against these 300 Spartans here, Ukrainian Spartans, is an incredible success in my eyes for the Ukrainians, because it ties up so much Russian capabilities. My friends, Russia is launching everyday Shahed drones, Iranian Shahed drones, against Ukrainian military and civil infrastructure. They are also producing Shahed drones themselves in Russia now, because Iran sold them the capabilities, the code and the logistics, everything to do so. And they are doing so. And I have to admit that Shahed is an incredibly successful drone, because if you take out the Russian bribe money, the drone actually itself is pretty cheap to make. Of course, it's a weak and slow and loud drone, but it's cheap to make and easy to make compared to some more capable drones. Russia's making them. The issue with them is they will saturate Ukrainian skies, soaking up very expensive Western anti-aircraft ammunition. So Ukraine has a counter weapon to them, and I will introduce to you to Vampire, a new Ukrainian anti-drone, actually anti-Shahed system. United States produced Hydra 70 rocket, unguided rocket, which cost $2,500 to make en masse. So it's an incredibly cheap rocket, and it's quite old. United States has, I don't want to say hundreds of thousands, but tens of thousands of them waiting to be decommissioned, and other countries, NATO countries, also have them. They will be sent to Ukraine. Canada is working on it to send 80,000 of these missiles to Ukraine. Rockets, sorry. Now these rockets will not be used by Ukrainian attack helicopters because the choppers will be shot down. What they will be used as is anti-air defense systems. These unguided missiles will be equipped with very cheap laser finders, and they will be put on back of the pickup trucks, much like you are buying for Ukraine and I'm delivering. And the Vampire vehicle is a pickup truck with a launcher in the back, a laser finder and a radar system all on one truck. The missile, it can shoot out 4 Hydra missiles at the same time, and then it can be reloaded very fast. These missiles cost 2,500 each, and converted into air defense missiles, they cost 20,000 each. It's the laser rangefinder and all other modulating kits they will be equipped with. One Shahed drone costs multiple times, tens of times more, actually almost 100 times more if you look at the way Russia is spending. So you still take out a Shahed drone with a Western missile that is, in some cases, by tens of thousands waiting for decommissioning, will be sent to Ukraine and remodulated to this anti-air defense missile. And it's a really perfect, wonderful, cost-effective, cheap and fast way to take out Shahed drones by using old rockets that will be decommissioned otherwise. So the Vampire system, in my eyes, great. My friends, and now for the first time in this week and first time in Minneapolis, I'll be butchering some Patreon names for you. Are you ready? Put in your earplugs and go and get your popcorn because this is gonna get out of hand. Odd Moest. Then we have Nelson Gomez. And finally we have Robert. But this is not it, because when I was in Canada, we were in Toronto and Ottawa. We were visiting big Artur's army leader, commander and supporter Heiner, who is a genius, absolute genius of a person. But in Ottawa, we stayed 2 nights, and we were really taken care of, really good. And there was a whole team of people who did that for us. And I want to really thank these people. And if you're watching, thank you, because the trip in Ottawa was really smooth and really enjoyable for entire traveling team. So I will read you the names, and of course I'll butcher them with my Estonian pronunciation. Karen Niven, Natalia Senjuk, Flora Benoit, Maureen Egan, Fred Mai, Matt Makaughey, Susanne von Toerne, Heiner Philip. And Heiner, actually, we spent 2 nights in Heiner's place. He was generous enough to let us stay in his RV camper, which was huge. It was bigger than my apartment. So Heiner, thank you very much. It was nice to actually sleep in luxury for 2 nights. And we shot a lot of Heiner's weapons also, like a lot of them. It was really lovely. Trevor Connolly. So thank you to everyone in Ottawa and Toronto and Heiner and Suzanne. Thank you, Daniel, because our trip in Canada was wonderful and the country itself really impressed me. Now until my next video, my friends, my next update, which will be tomorrow. So be sure to be back, even if you don't see the notification, just check on my channel. Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.